You might think, Turkey, Istanbul's vibrant bazaars, maybe the haunting beauty of Hagia Sophia, or perhaps just delicious kebabs.
The usual highlights.
Right. But what if I told you that beneath those familiar images lie layers of, well, truly astonishing history and culture?
Like what, for example?
Well, things like an ancient Roman city so intertwined with a modern village that the entire community actually had to be moved.
Wow, okay.
Or, get this, a powerful sultan dethroned in a harem coup started by mutineers literally tearing a hole in the roof.
It's true. So often, our understanding of a place is, well, it's shaped by these popular narratives, isn't it?
Unfortunately.
But the real depth, the truly fascinating insights, they tend to emerge when we dig into those unexpected details, those unknown facts that, paint a far richer picture.
Exactly.
So this deep dive into Turkey and the Ottoman Empire, using the sources you've provided, it isn't just about uncovering historical tidbits.
No, it's more than that.
It really is. It's about connecting seemingly disparate points in time and culture, offering you, our listener, a kind of shortcut to being, well, profoundly well-informed about a region that has shaped so much of world history.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to pull back the curtain on these hidden gems, really, to explore the surprising nuggets of knowledge and insight that hopefully give you a unique, in-depth understanding of this incredibly rich tapestry.
Yeah.
So, get ready for some truly extraordinary stories, things that might challenge common perceptions and reveal the complex, often unpredictable currents of history. Okay, so let's begin our deep dive with a foundational fact about the Ottoman Empire. And this is something most people find genuinely remarkable.
Yeah.
It holds the record for the longest span of uninterrupted dynastic sovereignty in world history.
That's quite a claim. Uninterrupted.
Uninterrupted. We're talking about a single ruling family, the Ottomans, maintaining continuous power for over 6 centuries.
Well, it's almost unparalleled globally. And this isn't just a number, a statistical quirk. It points to something deeper, doesn't it? A profound ideological framework that gave them immense legitimacy and stability.
Right. How did that work?
Well, Ottoman writers and historians often talk about this concept called din-u-devlet.
Din-u-devlet.
Okay. Din referred to a kind of spiritual energy, almost a divine mandate. It equipped the sultans with the capacity, they believed, to guide the human soul, to create the best conditions for connecting with the divine.
So, a spiritual authority.
Exactly. And then devlet, that represented charismatic authority, a sort of mystical ability to lead, to win battles, and, crucially, to bring prosperity and well-being to the huge, diverse populations under their rule.
And these weren't just, powers for their own sake.
No, not at all. They weren't seen as tools for personal gain, but as sacred trusts, bestowed upon the sultans for the material and spiritual flourishing of their subjects. That was the idea.
So it wasn't just heredity in the usual sense. It was this powerful belief in divinely sanctioned authority underpinning the whole system.
Absolutely. And if you compare this to other great historical empires.
Like Rome, or maybe China.
Right. Consider the Roman Empire. Despite its vastness, it saw numerous shifts in its ruling structure, and eventually it fragmented. Or even some Chinese dynasties, which, yes, were long-lived, but often had periods of disunity, different ruling houses taking over. The Ottoman longevity really stands out. It speaks volumes, I think, about the internal mechanisms, the societal acceptance, and just the sheer perceived legitimacy that the Ottoman ruling family managed to cultivate and sustain for such a long time.
6 centuries, it's staggering.
It truly is. And you have to consider what kind of deep-seated stability, what sense of cultural identity would that kind of unbroken dynastic rule have instilled in people?
Over generations.
Exactly. Imagine generations upon generations living under the same family, believing them to be endowed with these specific, almost mystical powers to ensure their prosperity, their spiritual welfare.
It must have fostered a powerful sense of continuity.
Definitely. A shared destiny, maybe. And remarkable resilience, even when the empire faced crises or huge changes. It wasn't just politics, it was a deeply ingrained worldview.
Okay, so moving from that grand scale, that dynastic continuity, let's zoom in a bit, to the bustling, everyday pulse of early Ottoman life. Let's explore the observations of the famous 14th century traveler Ibn Battuta.
Ibn Battuta, always a fascinating source.
He had some truly interesting encounters that reveal the region's surprisingly rapid cultural maturation. Initially, the sources tell us, the relationship between Turkish raiders and the local populations was, well, predatory. Conquest, plunder what you might expect on a frontier.
Standard practice, perhaps?
But apparently this dynamic shifted quickly. It became one of mutual interdependence once Turkish emirs reestablished order and started building, functioning societies.
And this rapid transformation is genuinely intriguing. Ibn Battuta, even though he sometimes felt, bit out of his depth because of language barriers, not many locals spoke Arabic. He was consistently impressed by the unique atmosphere of the inns he stayed in.
Inns, like just places to sleep.
Not quite. They weren't merely lodgings. They functioned as these vibrant, bustling markets.
Yeah.
Key nodes in the growing regional economy.
Wow. So trade happening right there in the inn.
Exactly. He recorded meeting an incredibly diverse range of professional travelers within their walls. A devout Muslim from Egypt, a pragmatic Jewish merchant from Spain, others from various backgrounds, all engaged in commerce, exchange.
That sounds incredibly cosmopolitan for the time.
It really was, by all accounts, a truly multicultural environment, fostering connections across huge distances.
And the character of these inns, It wasn't just the clientele.
No, that's another fascinating layer. They were often staffed by members of religious brotherhoods, frequently Sufi orders.
Sufis running inns.
Yes. And they practiced what the sources describe as an ethic of pietistic service.
Pietistic service.
Meaning, think of it as a profound sense of hospitality and communal care, deeply rooted in spiritual values. It transformed these inns from just commercial hubs into centers of genuine welfare, social support for travelers, ensuring their comfort, their safety.
That's a really interesting blend.
It is. And this intricate system highlights an astonishingly speedy cultural maturation among these emerging Turkish emirates, largely spurred, it seems, by their close and continuous contact with the more established Seljuk civilization on the Anatolian plateau.
So learning from their neighbors, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. And there was a palpable sense of competition among these Turkish emirs, not just for land, but for cultural and intellectual prestige.
Keeping up with the Joneses' medieval style.
Kind of. They actively vied to attract the best and brightest from abroad. Muslim scholars for their schools, eloquent Quran chanters for their mosques, skilled artists, entertainers for their courts.
So importing talent.
Absolutely. And this patronage wasn't just for people. It extended to ambitious building projects. Grand mosques, sophisticated colleges, public baths, and these very inns we're talking about.
Impressive structures.
Very. And here lies a truly remarkable, often overlooked detail. While the lead architects for these big projects were often brought in from established centers like Egypt or Syria,
Right.
the intricate decorative craftsmanship and the vast majority of the actual laborers, they were frequently local and Christian.
Wait, really? Local Christians building mosques and inns for the Turkish emirs?
That's what the evidence suggests. It utterly challenges any simplistic narrative of, pure conquest leading to complete cultural replacement.
It certainly does.
Instead, it reveals this profound and pragmatic cosmopolitan attitude, one that was seemingly fully compatible with their Islamic values, embracing collaboration, fostering deep cultural exchange right from the start.
You can almost picture it, these bustling multicultural inns.
A dynamic microcosm, really. Early globalization in action, long before we had the term. Diverse faiths, professions, all intersecting daily.
That really sets a different tone for the early Ottoman period.
Precisely. This openness to external talent, integrating local skills, local communities, it set a unique precedent for how Ottoman society would develop, built not just on imposition, but on layers of interaction, adaptation, absorption, a unique synthesis.
Speaking of early sophistication and, well, identity, let's get into the fascinating story of the birth of a language family. Many people probably haven't heard of Mahmud al-Kashgari.
Al-Kashgari, 11th century.
That's the one, an extraordinary Karakanid Turk. In 1082, he compiled this groundbreaking work, Compendium of the Turkic Dialects, or Diwan Lugat al-Turk.
And this wasn't just a list of words.
Not at all. It was the very first systematic linguistic analysis of the, several dozen distinct dialects that make up the Turkic language family.
The first, in the 11th century. That's incredibly early for that kind of linguistic work.
Yeah, it is. And it shows this astonishing level of foresight and cultural pride among Turkic peoples, centuries before the Ottoman Empire really hit its stride.
And his introduction, wasn't there something quite striking about it?
Oh, absolutely. Al-Kashgari's introduction is incredibly bold, almost prophetic. He wrote, and I'm quoting here, "When I saw that God Most High had caused the sun of fortune to rise in the zodiac of the Turks.
Yeah, he's setting the stage.
Every man of reason must attach himself to them or else expose himself to their falling arrows."
Falling arrows. Wow. That's not subtle.
Not subtle at all. Especially in a linguistic book, it tells you immediately this was far more than just a dry academic exercise.
And a political statement, a cultural declaration.
Exactly. A clear signal of burgeoning Turkic influence on the world stage. It highlights this sophisticated early awareness not just of linguistic identity, but a growing sense of collective power, future prominence, long before the Ottomans became a major world power.
It speaks to this intrinsic understanding of a shared heritage, a destiny unfolding.
Right. This historical document didn't just catalog languages. It served as a testament to a growing Turkic self-awareness, a profound sense of their historical moment.
So the intellectual and cultural foundations for a powerful political identity were being laid thoughtfully centuries before the peak of Ottoman rule.
Yeah, providing this deep well of shared heritage for the Turkic empires that followed.
Okay, so from those intellectual roots, let's shift to something very physical. A story that vividly illustrates the incredible layering of history in Turkey in a way that's almost, well, unbelievable.
Intriguing. Tell me more.
Imagine this. A journalist, Ara Güler, makes an astounding discovery. He finds a remote village called Gare.
Okay.
But it's not just any village. It is entirely built amid the ruins of an ancient Roman city.
Entirely, like literally.
Literally. People there were using fragments of Roman columns as like fence posts for their animals. Ancient carved stones were the foundations for their homes. Roman sarcophagi, used as planters in their gardens.
That's incredible, like living in history.
Güler himself said something like, people say ruins are ruins, but this was something else altogether. The past and the present living on top of one another, a seamless, organic continuation.
Wow. So what happened when he reported this?
Well, what happened next is truly astonishing, maybe unique in archaeology. When Güler's photos got international attention, the eminent archaeologist Kenan Aram was brought in.
They excavate, presumably.
Yes, to fully excavate this magnificent ancient Roman city, which they identified as Aphrodisias. But Aram faced this unprecedented challenge.
Which was?
He had to undertake the monumental, and you have to think ethically complex task, of relocating the entire living village.
The entire village, every house, every family.
Every single structure.
Yeah.
Moved to a new site, just over a mile away, not a partial move, a wholesale transplantation of a community.
Good grief. An entire village picked up and moved for archaeology. How did people feel about that? Güler, for instance.
Güler himself expressed a profound sense of loss, a lament. He noted that the Aphrodisias of life, where people had so organically, intimately woven these ruins into their daily existence, was gone.
Replaced by what?
Replaced, he observed, by history, a meticulously excavated site, now a major international tourist attraction.
Oof. That story powerfully underscores this deep tension, doesn't it, between preserving historical sites for study and tourism and the very real human cost to the living communities who've, well, lived with these ruins for generations.
It absolutely does. It forces us to ask, at what point does preservation become displacement?
It certainly raises that question. What does it truly mean to effectively erase a living, evolving relationship with history for the sake of, well, archaeological purity and public visits?
The sheer scale of moving a whole village. It speaks not only to how important the hot Aphrodisias was, but also to the profound, often overlooked changes that preservation projects can impose on contemporary people and cultures.
A very tangible example of history not just being about stones, but about living people.
And it wasn't just whole villages being moved. It was also literal layers of history and belief being built right on top of each other.
Like how?
Consider the Isa Bey Mosque, built by the Aden dynasty in 1375 in Ayasuluk, that's medieval Ephesus.
Okay, Ephesus. Got it.
This mosque was built on an incredibly significant, historically potent piece of land. It stood literally between the ancient temple of Artemis.
One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
Exactly. And the Christian church that contained the relics of St. John the Apostle.
Wow. Right between a major pagan temple and a major Christian shrine. That's some location.
It really is. And this specific example gives us a powerful illustration of how historical transitions were often far more complex, more nuanced than just a simple story of destruction or replacement.
So what happened there?
Well, Turkish raiders had indeed plundered the town and the magnificent Church of St. John back in 1304.
Okay, so there was destruction.
There was. But when Ibn Battuta visited just a few decades later, 1332, he made a striking observation. The once Christian Church of St. John had, by then, become the Friday Mosque of the Turkish conquerors.
So, converted, not demolished, repurposed.
Precisely. And archaeological excavations at the site, they reveal even deeper complexity. The mosque complex wasn't just a prayer hall.
What else was there?
It also contained shops and stables. These were likely dedicated in trust vakuf, that's the term, meaning their revenues supported the mosque and its charitable activities.
Okay, so an economic hub too.
Right. But here's the truly surprising, maybe the most telling detail. Christian pilgrims were still coming to venerate the relics of St. John in the decades right after the Turkish conquest.
Still, after it became a mosque.
Still. And crucially, they were paying a duty, a fee, to the new Turkish rulers for the privilege, just as they probably had to the Christian rulers before them.
That's fascinating. So the new rulers found a way to accommodate and even profit from the old religious practices.
Unmistakably, it reveals this incredibly pragmatic, adaptable coexistence, rather than just conquest and obliteration. It shows the new Turkish rulers establishing their own institutions, yes, but also finding practical ways to integrate existing practices, even financially.
That layering of religious sites, the continued Christian pilgrimage under Turkish rule, it must have really shaped the cultural and religious feel of the place.
Profoundly, I'd imagine. Fostering a unique, often unexpected synthesis of traditions and communities. It really forces us to rethink those simple narratives of conqueror versus conquered.
Okay, moving from these deeply layered sites to the big urban centers, let's explore Bursa in Edirne. Pivotal early Ottoman capitals, but they apparently house some truly unexpected social and economic dynamics.
Absolutely. Let's start with Bursa, famously known as the Silk City.
Right, the silk trade.
It was a primary staging point for Western caravans. But it's important to note, most of that silk reaching Bursa didn't actually come from nearby. It largely came from the southern Caspian region of Iran, passing through Tabriz.
So Bursa was a crucial hub on a major international trade route.
Exactly, which created immense commercial pressure on rival powers, by the way. But beyond its trade importance, Bursa was also this profound center of royal and elite philanthropy.
Philanthropy, like building things.
Yes, over centuries, no fewer than 5 Ottoman sultans, starting with Sultan Orhan, established these vast trust complexes there. Endowments that typically included grand mosques, madrasas, those are Islamic colleges, public soup kitchens, elaborate tombs.
The whole package.
Pretty much.
Okay.
But what's truly remarkable, and often overlooked, is the evidence for broader social mobility within Bursa. It wasn't just the sultans doing this building. Women of the dynasty and leading statesmen and women also established several more of these trust complexes, which shows their significant economic power and charitable influence.
Okay, so elite women and officials were also major players.
Definitely. But here's the really unexpected, almost groundbreaking fact. Something that challenges many conventional ideas about rigid social hierarchies in historical empires. Probate records. From a generation later in Bursa, they reveal that an astonishing 15% of recorded estates, meaning the estates belonging to the wealthiest class, were actually those of former slaves.
15% of the wealthiest people were former slaves.
Exactly, 15%. It powerfully demonstrates this remarkable, consistent path to social and economic prominence through manumission, the formal freeing of slaves.
That paints a very different picture, a much more fluid, opportunity-rich society than many might imagine.
Absolutely. It suggests individuals, regardless of their origin, could achieve significant wealth and status within the Ottoman system, far from a closed or static society.
That's a key unknown fact, I'd say.
Definitely. It shows talent, opportunity, and the institution of manumission provided real, substantial avenues for social advancement, even from enslavement. It offers an incredibly nuanced look at early Ottoman social dynamics.
Okay, and then there's Edirne. Strategically vital, right? Described as the sentry node on the route to Buda and Prague.
Critical location. For military control, westward expansion. Yet, its commercial life also held some surprising intricacies.
Such as?
We learned that a stone mosque in Edirne, itself a symbol of religious authority, was financed by revenues coming from a bedestan. That's a covered market.
Okay, a market funding a mosque. Makes sense.
But wait, this market significantly included the principal place and warehouse of the Genoese.
The Genoese, the Italian traders. They had a main warehouse inside an Ottoman market complex funding a mosque.
That's the detail. It's remarkable because it reveals international trade being directly embedded within religious endowments. A major religious institution isn't just relying on tithes or state funds, it's directly integrated into the vibrant global economy through its own commercial assets.
That shows a deep level of trust, or at least interdependency, between the empire and major foreign trading powers.
Absolutely. These details, both in Bursa and Edirne, paint this picture of Ottoman cities as vibrant, dynamic, often unexpectedly interconnected economic and social hubs. Far beyond the grand narratives, truly global players, even early on.
They really were. And speaking of interconnectedness, let's turn to something incredibly niche, but maybe profoundly telling about the Ottoman intellectual world. Ottoman chronographs.
Chronographs, court records, essentially.
Yes. Meticulous court records of events. Official versions date back to Sultan Murad II's reign, early 15th century, but they were actually copies and continuations of even older texts. Now, you might think these are just dry lists, dates, military campaigns.
Like annals.
Exactly. But that's where the truly unknown and fascinating content emerges.
What's so compelling about them?
It's how comprehensive and varied their entries became over time. While, yes, earlier records might have been hopelessly garbled, due to repeated copying limits of early record keeping,
Sure.
they evolved into remarkably detailed accounts. Beyond just military campaigns, they meticulously included things like births, circumcisions, and marriages of the Sultan's sons, deaths of important figures, comets and solar eclipses and the panic they caused, and disasters such as earthquakes and epidemics.
Wow. So everything from royal milestones to natural disasters and celestial events, all in the same record.
All mixed together, it wasn't just a political chronicle, it was this comprehensive mashup of natural history and what they considered sacred history, all interwoven.
So these chronographs were a unique way of setting current events in a context where political history, natural history, and sacred history came together.
Exactly. They were deeply concerned not just with marking time, but with understanding time and its meaning. And critically, the sources point out, they presuppose the same advanced philosophical astronomy that underlay scientific work all over Southwest Eurasia.
Including the astronomy Copernicus later used.
That's the connection made. It really makes you think about the intellectual environment of the Ottoman court.
Imagine the scholars, scribes, astrologers, meticulously recording all this diverse stuff, not just listing facts, but actively trying to discern patterns, find deeper meaning in how human actions, natural events, and maybe divine will all interacted.
It wasn't just bureaucratic record-keeping. It was an attempt to understand their place in a vast, interconnected cosmos.
It definitely shows a profound intellectual depth, a holistic approach to knowledge that maybe isn't typically associated with historical court admin, and it connects them directly to the broader scientific currents of their time.
Okay, let's dive into a story now that sounds like it's ripped straight from a political thriller, but with a truly bizarre, violent twist. The harem and the hole in the roof, leading to the shocking assassination of Sultan Osman II.
Ah, yes, a truly chaotic episode. It all started after Sultan Ahmed II died unexpectedly in 1617.
Right, triggering a major succession crisis because, for the first time ever, an Ottoman sultan was succeeded not by his own son,
but by his mentally ill brother, Mustafa I.
Mustafa I. And this decision was largely driven by the Grand Mufti's support, even though Mustafa was widely considered feeble and unstable.
That's right. This initial break from established Ottoman tradition, moving from father to son to the eldest male member of the dynasty, immediately destabilized things, set the stage for unprecedented power struggles.
How long did Mustafa last the first time?
Only 3 months. The chief eunuch, a very powerful figure in the palace, successfully orchestrated his deposition.
Clearing the way for whom?
For the young 14-year-old Osman II to take the throne. However, Osman's brief reign was just fraught with tension.
What happened?
In May 1622, mutinous troops, mostly Janissaries, reacted with explosive anger to what they perceived as Osman's pilgrimage plan.
Pilgrimage plan? What was that?
He'd ordered his personal pavilion transferred. Now that was usually the first step for a military campaign, but the Janissaries interpreted it differently. They thought he intended to leave Istanbul on a pilgrimage, maybe to Egypt or Syria, perhaps to recruit a new army loyal only to him, thereby bypassing them, the powerful Janissary.
Ah, so they feared being replaced.
Exactly. That fear ignited a full-blown rebellion. The mutinous troops stormed the palace grounds in unprecedented violation of sacred space.
And this is where the roof comes in.
This is where the roof comes in. Here's the truly incredible, almost cinematic part. They broke directly into the harem, the Sultan's highly protected private quarters. Not through a gate.
How then?
By literally tearing a hole in the domed roof to get access.
Tearing a hole in the roof of the harem? Unbelievable. What did they do inside?
Once inside, they seized the deposed Mustafa Fandang, dragged him out, forced the ulema, the religious scholars, to officially reinstate him as sultan, and then they brutally murdered Osman's Grand Vizier and the Janissary Aga, the head of their own corps.
Chaos. What happened to Osman II himself?
Days later, Osman was captured and strangled, the first Ottoman sultan ever to be murdered by his own troops.
Just incredible. This is so far from the image of an unchallengeable, monolithic Ottoman state.
Completely. It reveals these profound, violent internal divisions. It underscores the intense tension between Ottoman tradition, which included the privileged standing army, the Janissaries, their entrenched patronage networks, and the rapidly changing power dynamics at court.
And ethnicity played a role, too.
It seems so. Often understated, but many in the standing army were from diverse backgrounds, Slavs, Albanians, and they were often associated with heterodox Sufi orders like the Bektashis, which more sober Sunni clerics viewed with suspicion.
It's worth noting, too, the first Grand Vizier who came directly from the Janissary Corps itself was Huzrev the Bosnian. Shows the complex ethnic and social mix in positions of power.
Right. This whole episode is just a stark illustration of how violence or its threat had become an almost normalized, if desperate way of negotiating political change within the empire, even at the very top.
It really shatters that illusion of absolute, unchallenged central power. Highlights the deep internal contradictions, the shifting alliances constantly reshaping the state. And these same Janissaries, who became such a dominant, often unruly force, they eventually met a truly fiery, definitive end under Sultan Mahmud II.
Ah, the auspicious incident, a pivotal moment. Let's set the scene. It's the summer of 1826.
Okay.
The Ottoman Empire is facing existential threats. Mehmed Ali, the ambitious governor of Egypt, is consolidating power, even threatening to partition the empire.
A serious challenge.
Huge. Meanwhile, Sultan Mahmud II, a shrewd, determined reformer, he's closely watching the dramatic military reforms happening in Russia under Peter the Great, particularly Peter's ruthless suppression of the Streltsy, his own powerful, rebellious elite guard.
So Mahmud saw a parallel.
He absolutely did. Mahmud knew that to truly modernize, to centralize his empire, he had to deal with the Janissaries.
And the Ottoman court actually studied Peter the Great's methods.
Meticulously. Peter's brutal struggle with the Streltsy directly influenced Mahmud's audacious and ultimately ruthless strategy. Drawing lessons from Peter's success, Mahmud empowered his Grand Vizier, Gali Pasha.
To do what?
To make an incredibly blunt, direct announcement in May 1826, the abolition of the Janissaries.
Just like that. Abolish.
Well, it wasn't just disbandment. It was the creation of a new European-style corps, the Asakiri Manshuri Muhammadi, the victorious soldiers of Muhammad. The idea was to absorb many Janissaries, but fundamentally reshape the military's loyalty, making it direct to the Sultan.
How did the Janissaries react? I can't imagine they took it well.
They did not. Just 2 weeks after this earth-shattering announcement, on payday, the treasury, likely under Mahmud's orders, refused to honor their old pay ticket.
The final spark.
Exactly. Fights erupted. Thousands of Janissary troops barricaded themselves in their barracks in Istanbul. Mahmud II's response was immediate, overwhelming, absolutely ruthless.
What did he do?
He unleashed artillery, systematically pulverized the building in an artillery barrage, and burnt it to the ground, killing everyone inside.
Good Lord, a massacre.
A massacre, later termed, rather euphemistically, the auspicious incident. It utterly eradicated the Janissary Corps.
This wasn't just military reform then, it was a brutal assertion of central power.
Completely. A shocking, pivotal, and maybe unknown event to those unfamiliar with deeper Ottoman history. It fundamentally reshaped the empire's internal dynamics, its future.
And the comparison to Peter the Great is key.
Crucial. It highlights a conscious, strategic decision by Mahmud to eliminate this traditional, immensely powerful, increasingly disruptive force, ensuring the Sultanate's absolute authority, paving the way for sweeping reforms across the empire. This level of violence, the strategic internal purge, it marked a definitive end to one era and the beginning of another.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to another often overlooked but utterly crucial aspect of the Ottoman Empire's dynamism, its unseen financial engine, significantly fueled apparently by Jewish merchants.
Yes, this is a really important part of the story. After 1453, and especially after the Reconquista in Spain and the Inquisition,
Right. Many Jewish refugees came to the Ottoman Empire.
thousands upon thousands. And this wasn't just a massive humanitarian influx, although it was that too. Their arrival stimulated what the sources describe as a profound liturgical renewal and a broad cultural renaissance within the existing Ottoman Jewish communities. It really enriched the empire's social fabric.
But their impact went beyond culture.
Far beyond. These Sephardic commercial networks were profoundly instrumental. They literally led the empire's economic integration of the region.
How so?
Jewish merchants, using their diaspora connections, their linguistic skills, they became incredibly prominent in key international markets, particularly the lucrative wine and textile trades.
Wine and textiles, okay.
And Jewish entrepreneurs predominated at many of the major ports across the Mediterranean and Black Sea. Bustling hubs like Alexandria in Egypt, Sidon in modern Lebanon, Kifi in Crimea, they effectively wove the Ottoman Empire into the broader global economy.
And here's the truly unknown, perhaps surprising role, the one that really speaks to their indispensable contribution.
They also ran the financial affairs of Ottoman Egypt.
Wait, they ran the finances of Ottoman Egypt, a whole crucial province.
That's what the sources indicate. Think about the significance. This resource-rich province, its complex taxes, revenue systems, managed and largely controlled by this community.
That's incredible power and trust.
It is. And furthermore, their unique dialect of Castilian Spanish Ladino, enriched and influenced by Turkish, Arabic, Greek, Germanic languages they encountered. It actually evolved into an international language of commerce across the Ottoman sphere and even beyond.
So their language became a key tool for trade.
Exactly. This whole picture undeniably demonstrates the essential, yet often overlooked, role of Jewish communities in the Ottoman Empire's economic prosperity, its global reach.
It paints a picture of a truly cosmopolitan, interconnected society, where diversity wasn't just tolerated, but actively fostered and, in many cases, directly contributed to the empire's strength, its wealth, its sophisticated commercial infrastructure.
Absolutely. A powerful counter-narrative to any idea of a homogeneous, inward-looking empire.
From high finance, let's bridge to another unexpected, fascinating interplay: Sufism and commerce.
Right. It's well known that Ottoman sultans actively patronized both sides of Islam, you could say. Academic Orthodox Islam and the more mystical, experiential traditions of Sufism.
Okay.
In fact, early Ottoman scholars were often mystics themselves.
Yeah.
Deeply immersed in profound spiritual texts, like Ibn Arabi's Bezels of Wisdom or Rumi's epic poem, the Mesnevi.
Deep spiritual learning, but then you have these powerful clans like the Khazdalas.
Yes, the Khazdalas in Egypt, for example.
Yeah.
They simultaneously built a huge conglomerate through utterly pragmatic means.
Oh.
Through aggressive recruitment within the Janissary Corps and adept management of investments in coffee.
Wait, Sufi-connected clans, recruiting Janissaries, and investing heavily in coffee. How does that all connect?
This is where the layers of Ottoman society get incredibly complex and interconnected. Grain and coffee were consistently the highest profit commodities.
Okay.
And they were intrinsically linked through the sacred geography of Mecca. At the huge annual commercial flow that coincided with the Hajj pilgrimage, Egyptian grain was exchanged for Yemeni coffee.
Ah, the pilgrimage was also a massive trade fair.
Exactly, creating enormous wealth. And crucially, Janissary officers, often seen just as elite soldiers, they weren't only heavily invested in caravan security along these vital routes.
Protecting the goods.
Yes, but they were also directly invested in the grain and coffee trades themselves. They even controlled key Red Sea and Mediterranean ports like Suez and Alexandria, crucial choke points for these goods.
So Janissaries were major players in international commodity trading.
Major players. And this clearly demonstrates how immense wealth and secular power became deeply imprinted upon leading ulema, religious scholars, and Sufi orders, who were often connected to these networks through patronage or family ties, like the Khazdalas.
So you have this situation: deep spiritual patronage, study of mystical texts, coexisting, even intertwined with Janissaries running vast, incredibly lucrative commercial networks, making massive profits from coffee and grain.
It's not just unexpected. It's a full-blown integration. Spiritual pursuits, military power, enormous material wealth, all within the same societal framework.
That's a truly remarkable window into the pragmatism, the intricate web of influence that defined the Ottoman state.
It really is. This deep integration of spiritual and material pursuits wasn't some weird anomaly. It was a defining characteristic. It profoundly shaped the daily lives, the aspirations of Ottomans at every level.
It suggests that for many, wealth and piety weren't necessarily separate spheres.
Often fluidly intertwined, defying our typical modern assumptions about the division between sacred and secular. It paints this rich, nuanced picture where piety and profit could, and often did, walk hand in hand.
Okay, let's shift now into modern Turkey, its vibrant living heritage. Let's talk about the saz, or bağlama.
Ah, the saz. Beautiful instrument.
One of the most important, most ubiquitous instruments in Turkey, right?
Yeah.
Widely played, celebrated, taught everywhere.
Absolutely central to Turkish music.
But here's the unique engineering detail. The thing that makes it so exceptionally versatile, so central to their musical traditions. It's a long-necked lute with frets that are tied onto the neck.
Tied on, not fixed.
Exactly. This seemingly simple construction detail is actually profoundly significant. What's unique is that these frets are not fixed. They can be moved to change the tuning of the scale.
Movable frets.
Which is precisely why its alternative name is bağlama, literally meaning ligature or something tied on. The instrument typically has 8 strings and 3 courses, groups of strings tuned to the same note, giving it that rich, resonant sound.
So unlike a guitar where the frets are embedded, the saz movable frets point to this deep tradition of adaptability, an incredibly nuanced approach to musical expression in Turkish culture.
It allows players to easily create microtones, right? Those intervals smaller than a semitone.
Precisely, which are absolutely central to the intricate melodic structures of Turkish classical and folk music, the makam system. It's a tangible example of Turkish ingenuity, built right into an everyday cultural icon.
You can literally retune it on the fly for different scales, different microtones, adapting it to a huge range of melodies.
It allows for an incredible breadth of melodic possibilities, fundamental to so many traditional Turkish forms. This inherent flexibility speaks to a musical tradition that deeply embraces subtlety, fluidity, microtonal variation, distinguishing it significantly from many Western instruments with their fixed, equally tempered pitches.
It's not just a technical detail, it's really a cornerstone of their musical identity and heritage.
Okay, let's turn now to one of the most towering, transformative figures in Turkish history, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk.
Atatürk, founder of the modern republic.
We all recognize him for his remarkable intelligence, his unwavering determination, his visionary reformist spirit. He fundamentally revolutionized the deteriorating Ottoman Empire into a modern, secular Turkish republic. His strategic genius, his foresight, truly reshaped a nation.
No question about his historical significance.
Yet, what's often less emphasized in the grand narratives, perhaps, is a particular deeply personal trait, his unconditional altruism.
Unconditional altruism, how so?
The sources highlight that throughout his leadership, he consistently worked tirelessly for the good of the country and its people. He pursued his vision unselfishly for his dreams, achieving most of these monumental goals at a relatively tender age in his career. It wasn't just political maneuver. He was seen as this profound personal dedication.
Is there a specific example given?
Yes, and it's incredibly simple yet profoundly powerful. Ataturk personally teaching the revamped Turkish alphabet directly to people in public squares and villages.
So he wasn't just issuing decrees from Ankara, he was out there teaching.
Exactly. Not just relying on ministers, he was on the ground, actively engaging with ordinary citizens, embodying the very change he sought to instill.
That paints a different picture. Not just the strong intellectual leader, but someone driven by this almost selfless personal commitment to the nation's well-being, its education.
It's a deeply human aspect, often overshadowed by the grand political achievements.
And it raises an interesting question for us to think about, doesn't it? What does it truly mean for a nation's founder to embody that kind of personal altruism and dedication?
How might that unique quality have permeated, shaped the early republic, instilling maybe a deeper sense of shared purpose, collective dedication, as people embarked on building a new nation?
It suggests a leadership rooted not just in political ambition, but in a genuine, deeply felt care for the populace, which must have left a lasting imprint.
Okay, beyond human history, cultural achievements. Turkey also possesses an incredibly rich natural heritage.
Right. You might not immediately think of it, but Turkey boasts very rich biodiversity, largely due to its unique geographical location, a biological bridge between Europe, Asia, and Africa.
And surprisingly, perhaps, they take protecting this natural wealth with remarkable seriousness. Sophisticated bureaucratic effort, even.
How sophisticated are we talking?
What's truly impressive here is the level of administrative detail, the robust system they've put in place. Turkey has implemented an advanced electronic system for managing CITES permits and certificates.
CITES, that's the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species.
Exactly, ensuring stringent control over cross-border movement of protected species. Furthermore, they've gone to the extraordinary effort of translating 10 identification guides and 543 identification sheets into Turkish.
Wow, what kind of guides?
Covering an incredibly diverse range: turtles, tortoises, sturgeons, paddlefish, sharks, ivory, even specific types of cacti.
Cacti, that's...
It is. And these invaluable resources are meticulously distributed to all relevant enforcement agencies, customs, police, gendarmerie, to ensure effective on-the-ground enforcement.
That's a level of detail and commitment you might not expect. What about penalties?
Incredibly strict. A powerful deterrent. For general CITES violations, a hefty administrative penalty, 150 million liras. But for more severe offenses, like hunting with poison,
What happens then?
the legal ramifications escalate dramatically. Culprits face an imprisonment penalty from 1 to 3 years and a heavy monetary penalty not being less than 1 billion liras.
Prison and a massive fine.
And on top of that, the criminal's hunting certificate is canceled, and they can never obtain this certificate again. Permanently banned from hunting.
That is serious.
This comprehensive, strict approach undeniably showcases Turkey's serious, often overlooked commitment to wildlife protection, goes far beyond common perceptions focused on history and culture.
Even the regulations for handling confiscated live animals, transport, accommodation, quarantine sound incredibly detailed.
They reveal a remarkably robust, albeit operationally challenging, system designed to safeguard their natural heritage. It's a compelling reminder that a country's heritage extends far beyond human history to its natural world, and modern governance involves these complex, multifaceted efforts to protect it.
A very modern, scientifically informed approach to conservation.
Okay, finally, let's conclude our deep dive by exploring a truly thought-provoking, maybe unknown aspect of modern Turkish identity: the contested narratives around its claim to Byzantine history.
Ah, the Byzantine connection. This sounds like it could be controversial.
It is. Our sources present this intriguing, often heated debate, encapsulated by the question: do you guys think Turkey has a claim to Byzantine history?
And what are the viewpoints?
Diverse, as you'd expect. It really sparks strong opinions, touches on deep questions of national identity, historical inheritance. Some argue a definitive yes,
On what grounds?
often citing cultural continuity, especially for current Turkish citizens whose ancestors were part of the Ottoman Empire, which obviously inherited much from the Byzantine legacy. They might assert that current Turks have a connection stronger than most other countries mentioned under Balkan here, implying a continuity of people, traditions, that persisted despite shifts in governance.
Okay, so an argument based on cultural and demographic continuity. What's the counter-argument?
On the other extreme, you have those who vehemently respond no, often dismissing dissenting opinions quite strongly, calling them brainwashed or uneducated, which indicates the strong emotional charge of the topic.
Right.
There's also a more nuanced view, one that tries to distinguish between Turkey, the modern secular state, and Turks, the broader Turkic people, and their historical presence.
How does that distinction play out?
This perspective suggests the people themselves might possess a cultural or historical claim, even if the modern state, with its specific founding principles after the Ottoman Empire, does not formally claim that lineage in the same way.
And then the counter question comes up.
Inevitably, you think Turks have a stronger connection to Byzantium than actual Greeks, underscoring the deep historical and national sensitivities involved?
So this isn't just an academic historical debate.
Not at all. It's profoundly tied to modern Turkish identity, cultural inheritance, the ongoing negotiation of historical continuity in a contemporary context.
And what's fascinating is...
And what's truly fascinating here is that while the sources don't give us a single, universally accepted answer, how could they? The very existence of this robust, passionate, often contentious debate is, in itself, a compelling and often little-known aspect of modern Turkish self-perception.
It forces us to confront how nations grapple with defining their historical narratives, how cultural heritage is claimed or contested across time, how different groups assert their place in this complex tapestry of history and identity. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just take a moment. reflect on the incredible journey we've taken through some of Turkey's hidden gems.
It's been quite a tour.
We've seen how deeply interconnected history, culture, politics, even the natural world are in this remarkable country. From that unrivaled dynasty with its divine mandate,
To a village literally moved for ancient ruins.
from the fiery end of the Janissaries,
To the intricate movable wrecks of the SAS.
and from sophisticated wildlife protection efforts,
To these contested claims of Byzantine history. It's really a testament to constant evolution, unexpected connections.
indeed. And what's truly compelling is how these seemingly disparate facts, from cactus import regulations to the assassination of a sultan, they don't exist in isolation.
They illustrate this continuous thread: adaptation, innovation, surprising contradictions, enduring resilience across centuries. This intricate mosaic really challenges those simplistic narratives, invites a much deeper appreciation.
Absolutely. So, for you, our listener, maybe consider this as a final thought. How do these incredible depths of unknown history, these hidden layers we've tried to uncover today, how do they ultimately impact Turkey's complex identity, its nuanced place in the world right now? Far beyond what you might encounter on a typical tourist brochure or, frankly, in a standard history textbook.
It's a question that continues to unfold, constantly being renegotiated, a fascinating place, full of surprises.